As a devout member of my small town's close-knit community, Sundays were a sacred tradition filled with faith, family, and fellowship. But when a mysterious preacher named Karen arrived and demands money from churchgoers, it all went into a spiral. Here's how it all went down. Growing up in my small town, everyone knew each other. I came from a devout Catholic family, with generations having lived and prayed in this very community. Sundays were sacred to us. My parents had instilled in me the importance of faith, and it was something I held close to my heart. Attending Sunday Mass was a ritual, but it wasn't just about the prayers. It was also about the sense of community, of belonging to something greater than oneself. After services, the entire town would gather at the local park for a community potluck. The kids would play, the adults would chat, and it felt like one big family reunion every week. The bonds we shared with our neighbors, the connections made at church, and the teachings from the Bible studies gave me a solid foundation. It was more than just tradition, it was a way of life. But things changed when Karen moved to town. Karen was a preacher, or at least she claimed to be. With her short bob haircut and perpetual frown, she began to gather a following. People whispered about how she was a powerful healer and could connect directly with God. One Sunday, after our regular pastor was on vacation, Karen took the stage. "Good morning, dear believers," she started. "I have received a divine message from God." I nudged my best friend Mike, who sat beside me. "Did she just say she got a message from God?" Mike hushed me, eyes wide. "Just listen." "I was in deep prayer," Karen continued, "and the Lord spoke to me. He said that for our community to be saved, we must all donate generously." Now, asking for tithes wasn't unusual, but the emphasis Karen put on the word generously sent alarm bells ringing. She walked down the aisle, basket in hand. "God told me that each one of you should give at least $100 today," she said, stopping in front of an old lady named Mrs. Thompson. Mrs. Thompson, living on Social Security, trembled as she pulled out a $20 bill. "I'm sorry, Karen, it's all I have." Karen's face twisted into a scowl. "God said give me your money, Mrs. Thompson, not excuses." The whole room gasped. I could feel anger bubbling up. But before I could react, Karen moved on, pressuring others. Some gave in out of fear, while others, like me, just watched in horror. Mike leaned over. "This isn't right!" Suddenly a voice boomed from the back. "You're a fraud, Karen!" All heads turned to the entrance. It was John, a member of our community known for standing up for what's right. Karen's face turned bright red. "How dare you!" John stepped forward, holding up a piece of paper. "I did some research. You aren't ordained. You've done this in 2 other towns," the church murmured. Karen's eyes darted around, looking for an escape. But before she could react, the local sheriff, who was also in the congregation, stepped forward. "Karen," he said calmly, "you're under arrest." Her face paled. "This is God's will. You can't arrest me." The sheriff simply cuffed her. "We'll let the court decide that." The next few days were a blur. News of Karen's arrest spread like wildfire. It turned out that she had swindled multiple communities before moving to our town. She had no intention of using the money for anything but her own gain. The town was shaken, but there was a silver lining. We all came together, stronger than before. John set up a fund to help those who had lost money to Karen, and everyone chipped in. It was heartwarming to see our community bond in the face of adversity. A few months later, Karen was found guilty and sentenced to jail. Our town went back to its peaceful ways, but we all became a little more cautious, a little wiser. And every Sunday, as we gathered in the park after church, we would raise a toast to John, our local hero, reminding us that no matter how convincing a scam might be, the truth will always come out in the end. Nice video. This story is unbelievable. It's so important to be cautious and not fall for scams like this. Kudos to John for standing up for the truth and bringing justice. Our community's unity and resilience are truly inspiring. I never suspected anything was wrong in my seemingly perfect marriage until I found 2 misplaced tampons. As I dug deeper, strange occurrences unfolded. A mysterious woman, secret meetings, and a shocking revelation. Now, with my trust shattered and my anger boiling, I must uncover the truth. Here's how it all went down. I am 29 years old and have been with my husband, who is 30 years old, for 7 years and married for 4. I have never had a reason to suspect that he was unfaithful to me, or even remotely dissatisfied with our marriage. He likes to joke that we are still in the honeymoon phase, even after nearly 5 years and 2 kids. I wouldn't have questioned that, or him, if it weren't for a surprise I found in his car last month. When buckling our daughter into her car seat, I noticed something slotted between the cushions. I pulled it out and saw that it was a tampon. This wouldn't have been so unusual had I not had an IUD that has stopped my period for the past year, and I didn't even recognize the wrapper style. "Hey, honey," I said, my curiosity piqued. "Take a look at this." I brought it to my husband's attention, and he didn't seem to understand what it was, let alone why I was holding it, until I told him where I'd found it and why I was almost certain it wasn't mine. His brows furrowed, and he shrugged. "Maybe it belongs to one of my coworkers, like Fiona. You know, sometimes we carpool to lunch, and it could have fallen out of her purse or something." I nodded, trying to dismiss the odd feeling in the pit of my stomach. "Yeah, you're right, it's probably nothing. No big deal." I put it out of my mind until we had dinner with Fiona and her husband a couple of weeks later. I had sincerely wanted to believe my husband, but I just couldn't get over the way that tampon had been tucked into the car seat and how my husband had seemed not to have any regard for it whatsoever. As we sat around the dinner table, I couldn't shake the nagging suspicion. Maybe he was playing dumb. I don't know. The curiosity got the best of me, and I did something that I now feel kind of crazy for doing. I faked an emergency and asked Fiona if she had any tampons while we were out together. "Hey, Fiona," I said with a forced smile, trying to sound casual. "Do you happen to have a spare tampon with you? I ran out and, you know, it's that time of the month." Fiona's eyes widened in surprise, and she glanced at my husband, who suddenly seemed very interested in his food. "Oh, of course, I have some in my purse." She reached into her bag and handed me a tampon with a friendly smile. I took it, feeling a mix of relief and unease. It seemed my husband's explanation might have been true, but there was still something about the whole situation that didn't sit right with me. She handed me one almost identical to the tampon I'd found in our back seat, and I breathed a sigh of relief. So the tampon there was probably the same tampon here, and in all likelihood, there was an innocent explanation as to why it had been left in the back seat in the first place. I thought I'd seen the last of the out-of-place feminine hygiene products until I found another tampon this morning, this time in my sock drawer. I feel physically ill at the thought of my husband having an affair, and even more nauseated at the thought that the woman might have left these tampons out for me to find. If it was my husband's coworker, why would she give herself away by offering me one the other night? In any other situation, I would want to talk to my husband about this, but I feel too sick and embarrassed to approach him with what I found. What should I do? Contemplating every possible source of 2 tampons has been my personal hell for the past few weeks. So after what happened, I told my sister everything. The tampon in the back seat and the sock drawer, my husband's cluelessness, the tampon from Fiona, and all the things I suspected but didn't want to believe. We compared tampons, save for the backseat one I had already discarded, and they were a match, just in different absorbencies. I hadn't left either in a place where my husband or daughters would have found them and moved them around. My daughters didn't know what they were or where they had come from. My sister was convinced it was Fiona, either having a relationship with my husband, messing with me, or both. Direct confrontation of either party still seemed like a bad idea, so she suggested inviting Fiona and her husband over for our Labor Day barbecue. Unfortunately, they already had plans. My sister and I agreed that it was too soon for cameras without any other evidence, so it was just a waiting game from there. Watching my husband for any changed behavior, there was none. Our house for any misplaced foreign items, there were none. And even the girls for any new friends they might have met. My sister's husband was adamant on this last point, and partly why he was inclined to believe that the tampons were harmless. If anything had been happening in or around our home, he said, it would be nearly impossible to keep it from me and the girls, since my husband was the one taking them to and from daycare and most other activities during the week. I felt a good bit of consolation in that. It wasn't until my younger daughter, 2 years old, came down with something last week that I felt any differently. I wanted to be the one home taking care of her, but my husband insisted that I stay at work while he stayed home with her. I was okay with that. My sister and her husband figured it was a good sign that he would take the time off at a moment's notice, and at that point, we were all already beginning to put the tampon fiasco behind us. By the 3rd or 4th day, I was just happy to see a near-healthy child and a husband who was helping see her through it. Toward the end of that week, though, I came home to something strange. The toddler that I had left that morning in an old pajama set was now dressed in a onesie I had never seen before, with a tiny clip in her hair. I can't say I have the sharpest memory, but I have a pretty good sense of what my kids wear on a day-to-day basis, and particularly what kinds of clothes they wear. I had sworn off the full-length sleep suits with snaps across the front long before we ever had our second child. The long snaps are just a pain in the behind and a no-go for efficient diaper changes, in my opinion. It's just not something I would dress her in, and my husband knows as much. He doesn't plan for or buy the girls' clothes, and he certainly doesn't accessorize them. So I was bewildered, and kind of floored at the thought of someone around our sick child without my knowledge. I didn't think twice, and I went straight to my husband to ask if anyone had been over to see him or the girls. He seemed confused, like before, and asked me why I would think that. It had just been him and the kids all day. I asked him again if someone had stopped by to say hello, and he denied it. He told me to calm down. I might have lashed out and come forward with the accusations right then and there, but our older daughter was in the room, and she sensed something was up. In a calmer voice, I asked him a third time if anyone had been around our children, and my husband swore that the girls hadn't been around anyone but him. He also denied buying new clothes or doing anyone's hair. With our daughter in the room and my emotions all over the place, I decided to leave it. I couldn't make sense of it then, and it hardly seems clearer now, after I've driven myself half crazy with explanations that aren't adding up. After nearly losing my mind over a hair clip and a onesie, I realized I wasn't getting anywhere with the accusations and half-baked guesswork. I'd become so absorbed in the paranoia and misery of my situation that I wasn't sleeping, eating, or caring for my kids the way I should have been, and I wasn't getting any answers. So I decided to pull the trigger on the hidden cameras and have them shipped to my sister's house, with my brother-in-law agreeing to help with the install setup over at mine. Before the cameras were ever delivered, though, I got my long-awaited confirmation last week. A ring notification had alerted me to motion at the front door while I was at work, half expecting to see a delivery person, pet, or lawn care salesman for the 15th time. You can imagine my surprise when I saw a clip of a young woman leading my daughter into the house hand in hand, with my husband and other daughter close behind them. The girls were supposed to be in daycare, and my husband at work. The woman, as far as I knew, was living 2 states away with a court order keeping her there. I immediately called my husband to ask him what the heck this woman was doing in our house. He didn't answer, so I texted it to him. Even in his stupidity, he probably realized he had messed up by going through the front door, knew I'd gotten the ring notification, and wanted to delay the inevitable. By the 5th or 6th subsequent call, though, he did pick up. The woman on the camera was my husband's sister. As I would come to find out later, she was the likely source of both tampons, the onesie, and the bow. She is also a registered sex offender and a recovering addict who spent the better part of her adolescence and young adulthood coercing the silence of another one of my husband's family members after she had molested them. I hadn't seen or heard from her in years, and from the way my husband talked about her, I didn't expect I ever would. But here she was, in our house with our children. Suffice to say, I was livid. It wasn't an affair at all, and still, somehow, infinitely more disgusting knowing who it was and why all of this had been happening. Apparently my sister-in-law, fresh off another stint in rehab, had wanted to reconnect and make amends with people she'd hurt, and my husband was high on that list. My husband didn't want me to know, or, worse, try and keep her family, our children, away from her, so they'd been meeting in secret, often at our house when I was at work. They would enter through the garage, in my husband's car, so the ring camera at the front door wouldn't tip me off. She spent the night on a weekend I had been on a business trip and slept in our bed. She babysat our girls on a night my husband told me he had dropped them off at his parents'. She bought the girls clothes and dressed my youngest in the onesie and bow that my husband had promised on his life I had dressed her in myself. My husband swore this was all in my head. The tampons, the onesie, the bow, and all the rest. He was perfectly content to watch me agonize for weeks over a woman he insisted didn't exist, shrugging off each progressively more unsettling discovery like it was news to him and telling me I was being irrational. He insinuated that I was experiencing postpartum depression 2 years after I'd given birth. 4 years after I'd told him that one of my biggest fears for motherhood was to suffer PPD like my mother had with me, to not be fully present for our babies, and be left with a world of guilt and regret as they grew older. He told me I wasn't sleeping enough, that I missed the girls too much, that I needed to take a step back and reevaluate the state of my mental health. I gave him the benefit of the doubt because he was my husband, and because no other version of events made sense. Now after a month I have nothing to show for my trust, but this pathetic situation, and a lot of anger. Keeping secrets in marriage can be a bad thing in the future. It's important to have open and honest communication with your partner. Situations like the one described here highlight the importance of discussing and addressing any concerns or suspicions that arise. Trust and transparency are crucial for a healthy and strong relationship. I never thought a simple comment could unravel our relationship like this. It started with a harmless remark about how easy his job as a stay-at-home dad was. Little did I know my attempt to prove a point would push us to the brink. The next few weeks turned our lives upside down, challenging our roles, our emotions, and our very foundation. Here's how it all went down. So, the thing is, my husband is a stay-at-home dad. 3 years ago, he wanted to quit his job and take care of the house and children, 6-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son. I work a decent job and earn most of the money. My husband takes pride in being a stay-at-home dad. He always brags about how it is the easiest job in this world, and women are just complaining for no reason. But the truth is, I help him with the chores as much as I can. In the morning, I wake up and fix breakfast for them, while my husband gets our daughter ready for school. I also do meal preparations for lunch. All he has to do is assemble and cook them. I pack my and my daughter's lunch. When I'm at work, he does the cleaning and spends time with our son or does his own thing. Later, when I come home, I cook dinner, give my son a bath, help my daughter with her schoolwork, or play with them until bedtime. Besides that, whenever we do laundry, I fold the clothes that he washes and put them away. And during deep cleaning of our house, we split the tasks 50-50. I also handle all the doctor's appointments. This system works really well, but I hate that he thinks my contribution is not enough, that he does all the chores and I do not even lift a finger. Moreover, he has a blog and TikTok where he films his days. He also makes posts about how easy it is to be a stay-at-home dad, and women are just full of it. It is the easiest job in this world. I'm glad he likes it, but I hate that he thinks he is superior to everyone and invalidating their experience. I grew up in a house where my dad didn't even lift a finger, and my mom did literally everything around the house. He was the fun dad doing the bare minimum. So, I do not want that to happen to my husband. Also, it is my house too. I believe if both people do chores, the stress becomes less, but his comments make me irritated. So, yesterday my friend Ashley came to visit. She's a mother of 2, and her son is a whirlwind of energy, probably with ADHD. She's been struggling to handle him, and her husband doesn't seem to be much help. Kids can be a handful, right? Well, her son managed to break a cup in our house. Ashley was profusely apologizing, but my husband, in his usual direct manner, jumped in to clean up the mess. But my husband couldn't resist making a snarky comment. He told Ashley, "You must be doing something wrong as a parent because I'm a stay-at-home dad and it's a piece of cake. Maybe I should give you some parenting lessons." I could see Ashley seething with anger, and honestly, I couldn't blame her. Later that day, I confronted my husband about how rude he'd been to Ashley. He acted like he did nothing wrong and just brushed it off. That's when I decided to point out that he doesn't handle all the household chores either. I mean, I contribute at least 40%, so that's why he thinks it's so easy. But he, being his stubborn self, argued that what I do isn't significant compared to his responsibilities. I reminded him that he's been acting really mean to everyone lately. We've been lucky that our kids are fairly well behaved and not overly active, but most parents aren't that fortunate. He just scoffed and said, "How hard can it be?" Well, that's when things took a turn for the intense. We ended up in a heated argument, and he pulled out the "no man would ever sacrifice like I have" card. I was so furious that I decided to give him some space. But now I'm left wondering, am I a jerk to call him out on it? Just want to point out, I have no issues with him being a stay-at-home dad. I just don't like his attitude towards it and the way he thinks it is the easiest job in this world, because to me and most of the people, it is still a job that has no vacation days. The next day, I decided to stop working my part of the chores. I felt it was time to address the issue that had been bothering me for a while. I had a conversation with my husband about it the night before. I told him, "You know, it seems like you don't really appreciate the effort I put into taking care of the house." He looked surprised, but I continued, "I think you underestimate how much work it takes to maintain a household. Since you seem to think my contribution to the housework is nothing, I've decided that I'll stop doing everything altogether. If you believe being a stay-at-home dad is easy, then you should have the full experience of it." My husband's face showed a mix of confusion and frustration. "Are you serious?" he asked, clearly upset. I nodded, determined to make my point. Yes, I am. My friend's husband doesn't even lift a finger around the house, so I won't either. It's time for you to step up and take responsibility. He sighed, clearly not thrilled with the idea. "You can't just do this to me," he protested. I decided to address his concerns head on. "It's not about doing it to you, it's about making sure we share the responsibilities equally. I work all day at my office so that we can survive on one income, and it's selfish for you to expect me to do all the housework." The next morning, I stuck to my decision. I didn't wake up early to make breakfast or tidy up the house. Instead, I let my husband handle it. While it didn't seem too challenging for him, I could tell he was in a bit of a bad mood, perhaps realizing the true extent of the work that goes into managing a household. I asked him to prepare my lunch because that is also my job. He refused at first, but then I told him he said he will do all the household chores too. That includes my lunch as well. He only packed me a peanut butter jelly sandwich. I didn't do meal prep for lunch. It was his to figure out. At night when I came home, I didn't make dinner. I asked him to do it. He was shocked, but did it anyways. I didn't give my son a bath. He is fussy, which pissed my husband off. I only helped my daughter with her homework. I didn't help him with the laundry. The first few days, he didn't say a word. But after a week, it was showing that he is getting exhausted. He was getting more and more angry at small stuff, and usually cleaning would cool him off. But whenever he sees a mess, he throws a tantrum. On the weekends, I went to my mother's house to relax. That weekend, we were supposed to clean our bathrooms. He did that all by himself. As the days went by, I could sense his growing anger and frustration towards me. It was evident that my decision had taken a toll on our relationship, affecting our intimacy in ways I hadn't anticipated. After 2 weeks of silent tension, he finally confronted me one evening, his voice filled with anger as he practically yelled, "You've made your point!" I could see the distance that had formed between us, and I knew we needed to talk. So last night I gathered the courage to approach him and asked him to talk to me. He seemed reluctant, but finally relented. He told me he understood what I was trying to prove, but he didn't appreciate being treated like garbage, as if his feelings didn't matter. I tried to explain my perspective, saying, "You were the one who claimed that being a stay-at-home dad is easy. I just wanted to give you the full experience of it." However, he vehemently denied that my approach had been supportive. He expressed how he had felt invisible and underappreciated during those weeks, and how he had grown to resent me for seemingly disregarding his feelings and dumping all the responsibilities on him. As of now, he's still not talking to me, and it's clear that our relationship is strained. We've taken the step of booking a couples therapy session for next week in the hopes of mending the damage that has been done. Only time will tell if our relationship can sustain this trial, but we're both willing to give it a chance. After a month, we decided to do counseling, and yes, I sincerely apologized for my childish behavior. We discovered a lot of things about us and our relationships at the counseling sessions. Firstly, I apologized to him and explained why I did that. I wanted him to feel like it is not easy if you do not have help. I also mentioned my mother's experience in being the caretaker of the family and doing it all alone is exhausting, which I think now is a stupid way to get my point across. But I was hurt and very annoyed that he thinks women just complain about housework when most of them, I'm sure, don't have help from their spouses. He expressed that he gets it, and those few weeks when I didn't help him really took a toll on him. He doesn't get tired easily, but since he was doing all of it, it was tiring him. I acknowledge that. After a lot of talking and communicating, we came to the root cause. He said that sometimes he feels insecure about himself, like he is not doing enough for us. All of his guy friends have jobs. They provide for their family. His friend bragged about taking his wife on vacation in Greece. He felt small compared to that because he only made us dinner and gave me a massage. On the other hand, I gifted him a very expensive watch. He felt like he was supposed to be the provider of this family, but he feels really small because I am out here doing well in my career and he feels stuck. It was one of those moments that made me cry. I liked it when he made dinner for me and gave me a massage. He is a good cook. I asked him if he wants to go back to the workplace. If that is the case, he will have my full support. I know then things will change a lot. We both have to make compromises, but it will be worth it because I love him and he is the best husband anyone could ask for. He says he doesn't want to handle the pressure of the workplace. Last time he crashed and decided to quit. He likes being a stay-at-home dad, but also wants to earn. So, he is looking for a part-time job while doing what we used to do. I encouraged him to look into freelancing and remote work. He did find one, but it is low pay, so the search for a decent job is still ongoing. And he did apologize to my friend Ashley. He realized not everyone has it easy. I mean, we hit the jackpot with the kids because they are pretty quiet. People have different struggles. I know he is sincere because he deleted his blog posts about being a stay-at-home dad being easy. As husband and wife, they should have just talked about this issue openly and honestly, instead of resorting to a revenge tactic. It's important to communicate and find a solution together, rather than engaging in childish behavior. If you enjoyed today's stories, check out the other videos on your screen now. Submit your own stories at you'rethejerk.com. Subscribe now, or you're definitely the jerk.